like a Jakar poisoning.
Casual murder.
I'll kill you with music.
You'll have to wait until Dragon Con, so we got plenty of time to prepare.
Yeah, for people that saw my my bandmate Lee has been doing the Battle of the Bands. If you watched any of those, so we've both been kind of adopted by the classics track. So,
guys, just so you're aware, the live thing just turned on in the corner.
I saw that too, so.
Okay, first there's a kitty, and we must introduce the kitty before we do anything else while we wait on Gary. So.
Yeah, if anybody's actually
Karen's kitty.
Live, we didn't know we were on yet, so
right. I mean, I can take on the host status if we need somebody to, but
if we're gonna start, we need to start with the official thing here.
There we go.
Yes, if anybody is actually watching this is the original slate from the pilot of Babylon 5. So let's get this thing going.
Yeah, if you're watching this, can you leave a comment just to let us know that somebody is watching?
Well, actually, I don't think they'll see it here. We would have to look on Facebook because that's this chat is only for us.
Well, no, if you go to there's two things. There's one that says private chat and there's another one that says comments. The comment should come in on the one that says comments.
Comments are coming in.
All right,
hey,
so
Dan,
I guess
check your messages. Gary says to check your messages. I have a message from Gary. I am now Gary. I have the Gary talking stick. So I'm Gary Mitchel.
Oh.
I love nerd stuff.
Hi, Gary.
That's not. I gotta workshop my impression, right?
He says start without me. So.
All right. Well, we're starting.
Did you want to start with your song?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't I? I'll be the pre-show while we're waiting for Gary. So I'll tell my little spiel about why I am horny for Jakar, and then we'll sing a song about Jakar. And then that way, if the conversation goes into spoiler territory, so I'll just be brief. My name is Madison Metricula Roberts. I'm the opener. I'm the pre-show, and I actually have never seen Babylon 5. I somehow managed to completely avoid all spoilers for Babylon 5 in my entire life because I kept mixing up Farscape and DS9 and Babylon 5. I'm a next-gen girl, I'm 35, so it's like I could have seen it, but I just kind of missed it. But Gary was talking about starting a Babylon 5 podcast with his partner and was like, oh, do you want to write some theme music? 'Cause I'm a musician. And I was like, yeah. So I was like, okay, I should probably watch a few episodes for homework. And my husband immediately was like, Babylon 5? He's a Gen Xer, so he was just like, Babylon 5. And 10 minutes later, we had an HBO Max sub, and we were watching the pilot. And I saw Jakar in the pilot, and I was like, oh my God, gay villain, I love it. Oh my God, I'm here. And he was just like utterly delightful and over the top, and just the whole thing is so bonkers. And I was like, I'm on. I have buckled up. I am ready to jump through that jump gate. And so actually, so this is a song I wrote the first night I saw the first handful of episodes of Babylon 5. And it's about my husbando, Jakar. And I've gotten further in the series since then, but the sentiments are still deep within me. So this is a song dedicated to my husbando. Now I grew up a next-gen girl, loved Data, Jordy, and Troy. But I never got to DS9, though it might bring me joy. Turns out DS9 and Babylon 5 are two kind of different shows. Somehow in my head I mixed them up instead with Farscape and other 90s shows. So when Gary, my friend, said he would begin a podcast on Babylon 5, husband's eyes lit up, got an HBO Max sub, and he showed me the man who changed my life. Jakar, the narn who has my heart. I'll show you what my pleasure threshold is. Please don't go too far since I'm only on episode 6. He satellited down and asked to fool around just to get some psychic human genes. I looked at Hubs and said, that's the man I want in bed. And he sighed when I pulled up AO3. I mean, he straight up tried to kill that Furlan in a shell through deceit and barely contained glee. Jakar, you scheming sexy narn. I love a villain with a ruthless smile. Jakar, made directly with my heart. I'll call on your convoluted wiles. I'm not psychic, but I'm conscious. I don't have frictionless sheets, but I'm binging the whole series, and I hope you don't end up deceased. Oh, Jakar, Jakar, the narn who has my heart. I'll show you what my pleasure threshold is. Jakar, Jakar, please don't go too far since I'm only on episode 6. Well, Jakar, Jakar, the narn who has my heart. I'll show you what my pleasure threshold is.
Yay!
I love Jakar. He's the best character. Like, as soon as I saw him, I was like, Jakar, that's the best character. That the lizard man, best character. And my husband was like, yeah, he's the best character.
But he's all
so you've gotten my intro.
He's a bit more marsupial than lizard, you know, because they've got.
Yeah, man, I'm so into that, like, shared gestation. So the only spoilers I looked up to write that song on the night I saw the pilot was to look up, like, Narn reproductive biology. So the only spoilers I've gotten were, like, stuff about the pouches. And I was like, I'm all in on pouches. This is great. So
I think with Jakar, as long as you're into him, he's into you. I mean, sometimes, I mean, you know.
Yes, that's fair.
Jakar's into enthusiastic consent. I mean, like, he's all about negotiations and stuff. But yeah, I was thrilled to. Gary's the reason I started watching it at all. So I'm thrilled to tune in for a few. So I'll only be here for, like, the first parts of it because, again, I've somehow avoided spoilers my entire life. And I'm gonna. I don't know how I've managed that, but I'm gonna try and keep it that way. So I appreciate having me on for the beginning. So,
all right. Do you guys think we should just introduce ourselves then, and then move on to talking about the show?
And we've got the ghost of Gary floating around here somewhere.
Yeah, I know. I saw him pop in for a second. You know,
Seems like an idea.
we're in here. I see you.
All right, so I'll start off. My name is Nathan Laws. I'm the host of the 42 Cast. It is our last best hope for peace on the internet. No, it's a podcast where we talk about anything in genre fiction and with a rotating cast of people. I also do another show called Time Streams where my friend Juliet and I are watching through all of Doctor Who from the beginning. Yeah, so Babylon 5 is my favorite American television show ever, and so that's why I'm on this panel. And Van, why don't you introduce yourself next?
I would say Babylon 5 is the greatest single thing ever. I'm Van Allen Plexico, and I'm a writer and podcaster. I do the White Rocket podcast and On Her Majesty's Secret podcast. And yeah, I've been a Babylon 5 fan since day one, way back in early 93, and done a lot of panels on it and talked about it, and doing a new podcast called the White Rocket Babylon 5 Review Podcast. Very long title, but it's the White Rocket Babylon 5 Review Podcast. Andy Fix and I are covering 3 episodes every 2 weeks. So we are currently on Tuesday night, we will be talking about By Any Means Necessary, Signs and Portents, and everybody's favorite TKO, Demutai! So yeah, having a blast doing that.
All right, John.
No, let Karen go first. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Karen Henson. I do not have a podcast, but what I do have is a track at Dragon Con. So let's start there. So I'm the director at the military sci-fi media Dragon Con sort of area. We do a lot of different shows that are kind of in this same sort of zone. We do Battlestar Galactica, we do Farscape, we do Firefly, we do a lot of things, but more than anything, at least for this particular podcast, we do Babylon 5, and we do it a lot. We do it often and with frequency. So we very much enjoy any kind of conversations about this. If you really want to get me going, let's just talk Ivanova and Delenn for hours, and we can make that happen. But that is definitely something that I am here for. But I'm here for all the characters because they are fabulous and delicious and quite intriguing. And I will turn this over to John next to introduce himself.
Yes, I was trying to figure out where all the graphics are coming from. But my name's John Hudgens. I don't have a podcast either. People keep telling me I should, but I'm a bit busy on other things. I'm a filmmaker based out of Tennessee, and I was actually there before the dawn of the third age of mankind. Gary's in the shadows. No, I actually discovered Babylon 5 in 1992. Before it was on the air. I was one of the original Grid Epsilon people on Genie. Back when Babylon 5, looked like. Back when Babylon 5 looked like this, I worked for one of the first TV stations that aired it. I got to know Joe Straczynski through Genie and how he was being screwed over by his publicity people, actually Warner Brothers publicity people. And as for those of you who don't know, my connection to Babylon 5 is Joe Straczynski kept hiring me to do the Babylon 5 music videos back during the run of the show. We did long form trailers that he would use to promote the show at conventions. Some of them maybe were, early versions of the next season credits. And then after the show, I ended up doing the various memorial reels, for several cast members who were friends of mine. And I don't like doing them, but, sometimes, because I had to do one again this year. Babylon 5 was a hell of an influence on me. Like I said, it changed my life. And, I have been there since day one. So...
I feel honored and excited because this is all new to me. Like this whole world of it is just, it's what a 30-year-old show, but like it's I'm watching it in like real time and it's amazing.
Well, I'm going to take this. This reverse is getting me. I'm going to take this shirt off. But this is a shirt. Actually, Joe Straczynski gave this to me. This is from the 100th episode. They had these shirts made up for the cast and crew, but it's a little warm up here in my office. So.
Yeah. So I mean, Metricula, especially because of what you wrote this song. One of the things that's great about Babylon 5 are the various characters, and Karen mentioned a couple as well specifically, but. I think we should go around and just talk about, our favorite characters in the series and why we think, because that's one of the things that really distinguishes this show, I think. So, Metricula, since you already started about G'Kar, why don't you say a little bit, about why you were drawn to G'Kar so immediately?
Oh, I would love to. And then I think after this, I'm going to sign off. I'll still be listening off and on a little bit. My husband's got the little spoiler horn on for me. He's upstairs watching, but... just because I normally don't care about spoilers, but I've somehow gone my whole life. G'Kar is amazing. So like immediately I see like in the pilot, you see G'Kar and he's got this like...
right back. I'm not leaving.
Yeah, I got you. This like scheming kind of like, it was that scene in the pilot. And now I've watched through part of season 4. I've just mainlined it. But that scene in the pilot where he talks to not Ivanova, whoever the commander was, or from the pilot, and he's like, no, it's fine now, and he like skips away. I was like, that's the Scar villain, like that's the like. That's like an anchor. But what I think is so interesting is that he never loses some of that tenacity and that character, even as he sort of transitions from kind of a, like not a directly villainous figure, but like one that's like got his own motives, but he's just good. And it's like, it's so exciting to see a character, anytime anything bad happens to G'Kar, I was like, G'Kar cannot die. like, this will be fun, they said. Watch Babylon 5, they said. But there's something so compelling about the way Jakar's story, like, sort of the, like, oh, I didn't know it was that kind of podcast. But, like, that, I'm serious. Like, oh, man, we lost the actor far too young. But I just, that story of, like, kind of the freeing your people and having these extremely pure motives. I mean, like, at first you could have told me. So I watched what's the one where Kevin Sorbo is Space Jesus? I was like, oh, one of these captains is going to be Space Jesus, and it's like, no. I just thought it was so. I'm rambling a little bit, but it's like, it's just, there's so much, and I'm still processing it. But it's like, you've got like a Jewish analog, a really clear Jewish analog character in Jakar, in a show where there are actual Jewish characters and their religion is addressed. And I feel like both are addressed in ways, oh, Andromeda, thank you. Both are addressed in ways that are really respectful to the real world religion of Judaism as a cultural diaspora. And I thought that that was really interesting and really, like, oh, so much incredible energy and gravitas. Like, I just utterly captivated. Every time Jakar, I joked, every time Jakar would come on screen, my life would get better. But it's like, those are like really singular performances. And that he never loses some of the edge and some of the humor, even when he's becoming this like religious figure and this like freedom fighter. You know what I mean? Like, I cannot even with Jakar. It's like, it's so good, and it could be so hokey, and it's not. Like, even now, 30 years later, it's like, it's still like, this holds up pretty good, even though it's not like subtle all the time, but like just the best speeches. Like that, like the freedom speech, and then the like, what has Jakar endured? And it's just like, I don't know, I'm on a different plane of existence. So I'm gonna go to the Jakar place. So I'm gonna mute myself. But thank you for having me.
In the freedom speech, Joe had given us a sneak preview the night before of the season finale that season up in my hotel room. But the next day, this is back when he could show full episodes. You want to talk about a roar? He showed that episode at the San Diego Comic-Con. You know, and you want to talk about a room of 2,000 people just erupting when Jakar basically told Londo, "Go fuck yourself." Pardon my French, you know. But you know, just that's just one of my favorite, you know, one of my favorite memories from the show. Is just that roar of applause. You know, when he stood up to Londo, and just, you know, thousands of people were just like, yeah.
Just that whole, like, we will teach that sadness, you know, like that we will teach it to them again, like the we will be free. And it's this, I think it's so interesting when it transitions from that the shadows, you know, they're asking everybody, what do you want? And like the Narn and Jakar are just like, you know, I want to have my people free, and like, you know, fuck the Sundari, also pardon my French. But then it's like, they were good after that, you know, and it's like, it's just so, there's a purity to that. I don't know, but not like cheesy. It's just, it felt real. You know?
Jakar gets the most development of any character in the series, I think. I think that he moves the most from where he starts to where he finishes on the show. And of course, I've got to be very vague on that because you haven't seen season 5. But we had someone new join us, and I really think that he ought to be allowed to join in now. So please introduce yourself, and why don't you tell us who your favorite character on Babylon 5 is?
My name is Sherman Burris. I go by Nerdburger358 on the internet. My favorite character in Babylon 5 would have to be Kosh.
Why is Kosh your favorite character?
Because he is mysterious.
And Metricula, thank you for joining us. I see that you've signed off. But that song was epic. I want you to know. So Karen, why don't you tell us who your favorite character on Babylon 5 is and why?
I just get one.
For now.
What is this? I was about to talk about everything. Well, okay. So trying to pick a single favorite character is, why are you asking me to choose between children? I have to say, definitely Ivanova's up there without question. just because of, I mean, partly also it's going to be the embodiment from the actress. You know, like when you see that particular force and energy come through, and the general like ability to take control of a room and do what you've got to do with getting people's attention, then I appreciate that. And in professional settings, sometimes having that sort of spirit to channel into situations where you have to go in and maybe kick a few people's butts into place, that is healthy inspiration to take with you. Sometimes that attitude is helpful for me on a regular daily basis. But I can't also go without Delenn, because Delenn just is that kind of other side of the sort of quote unquote feminine archetypes of how to take control of the situation. Hers is much more diplomatic in nature and approaching kind of reasoning out a place for everybody to discuss and get to something. But then she also has her points of you need to turn your butt around, go be elsewhere. This is it. We're done. There is no further negotiation on this point. And knowing that she can work with people, but then also preserve those boundaries, that also does a lot for me. And also the feeling of knowing that you are 100% wrong about your entire life and everything you have thought and believed up to this point, and then having the courage of conviction to go into that moment and make a choice and make a stand, even though you know it's going to be super unpopular. That is definitely something that infuses the character, and I respond to that a lot. And then also, you know, I mean, Richard Biggs was amazing, and I like Dr. Franklin because he's snarky and sarcastic, and hey, why not?
You can just name all the cast. It's fine.
That was three.
Yeah, I know.
I held it to 3. I even picked ones y'all hadn't talked about yet. So, I mean, you know, I'm trying to be a team player here.
Yeah. All right. So, Van, who is your favorite character on Babylon 5 and why?
In the entire Babylon 5 universe, it might be Galen, but he's only in the movie and in Crusade. But as I've been trying to point out, since somebody said it over in the little, comment.
Yes.
But I think that in terms of Babylon 5 alone, my favorite character is Smiling Johnny, Nuke-em-all Johnny. I just always, I love it. I like a lot about him, but I like the fact that he's clearly so good and decent. You know, he's a strong leader, but he's a decent person. He's just trying to do the right thing. And all of his political enemies just vilify him. You know, he's a collaborator with the aliens. He's sleeping with an alien, all this kind of stuff. And yet, we see the truth, and we know we can see through. I mean, like deconstruction of falling stars is basically nothing but shooting holes in that very kind of thing where the media or something builds somebody up to be something that they're not, just for propaganda purposes. So I like that he I don't know. I mean, I'm looking forward to getting into season 2 again on our show again soon, because it's been, quite a while since I watched the entire series. So I'm still my brain is still kind of in Sinclair territory right now. It's kind of hard to, think forward. But he was always my favorite character, so I'll just stick with him.
Okay.
I got it right now. All
right, John, who's your favorite character and why?
I don't know that I can actually answer that. I mean, it all depends on the time, or the mood that I'm in. These days, and part of it's just trying to separate, the actor from, the character, because several of them I got to know quite well in real life, and so like these days I would probably still have to say Delenn. I mean, I actually had a dream about Mira the other night. I'm not going to go into it, but it was just but it was a real life thing, not a Delenn thing. Because, and partially, part of it also is, Mira looks a lot like my girlfriend Heather, and so that doesn't hurt. Well, it was interesting. The two of them when they finally met each other really hit it off, and I was hoping, to be friends for quite a long time that that was taken from us. But I'd have to say Delenn, not just because of the fact that I mean, who didn't have a crush on Mira back in the day? I mean, but yeah, Delenn.
My daughter's named after her.
Nice. Yeah, my wife and I said if we ever, because right now our dog, which is our first dog, is named Braytac after the Stargate franchise. But we said if we had a female dog, she would be Delenn. So that's we like naming our animals sci-fi fantasy type names. But yeah, so for me, I mean, like, I get what John is saying about it's so dependent because, Jakar would be an answer I might give on some days, or Delenn, or even Galen. Those are all characters that I really, really love. But since we've talked about all of them already, and now it's going to get down to either, I think I'm going to go with Marcus. It's down to him or Lanier. But Marcus is such a great character. Like when he's introduced, he, comes into the series. He helps expand the storyline by adding the detail of the Rangers and really getting into it. Because even though we knew they existed, we didn't know anything about them. And the whole idea of, and one of the things that Babylon 5 does so great that they do through that character are the plot through lines. Yes, the bow staff fighting.
Well, no, actually, Jason, that was Jason actually had pins made up. That was like Jason's logo when they were all.
Oh, really? Okay.
I've got one downstairs somewhere, but he had pins made up of that's like Jason's little Marcus logo.
Oh, okay. But they would have the through lines of the characters, and when you understand that Marcus is doing this because it was his brother's fight, and the fact that he's just pushing himself, and all this kind of stuff, that you get sort of the character side of that, and why he's the sort of person who launches himself into causes, right? And he will go to that cause to the bitter end. So he's willing to die for Delenn. He's willing to sacrifice himself for Ivanova. And it was one of those things where, it's painful to watch it. And you hate seeing it when it happens, but it makes so much sense from a character standpoint when it happens. And it was so, it felt so, I hate to use the word satisfying because it's not something pleasant, but it's satisfying in the sense of narratively satisfying, that's the way that they, write out his character. And so, I loved him. He was so funny. He was so fun. But he was, but I also like that fact that, how he's utilized within the series. And so, yeah, Marcus is one of my favorites. I have similar thoughts about Lanier, but we'll, I'm not going to take two characters. For side characters, Naroon would have been my pick because he is amazing. But
yeah, just on a little aside, I want to point out somebody in the comments was talking about nobody's talking about Zach Allen. Well, no, the funny thing is for me, Zach was always somewhat of an in joke. And Joe didn't know this, but one of our good friends all through college, who was the director of the Knoxville Children's Theater, was Zach Allen. He spelled it with a K, not an H. And so, I mean, and we finally got him hooked on the show. But for years, everybody was always gigging on him because of the name,
Yeah, I mean, I would be hard pressed to say there's any character of the main cast that I don't like. I mean, they're all great in one way or another. But we're talking about Babylon 5 now, almost 30 years later. And I know, believe me, I feel like I should get a walking stick when I say that. But why don't we talk about why this show endures? Like, what do we think, is why we're still talking about Babylon 5 this long down the path. So since you weren't here for the beginning, Sherman, why don't you start us off on that one? Why do you think that we're still talking about Babylon 5 all this time later?
It was a really good first run syndication show when a lot of network shows weren't really all that good at the time. So that for me is probably one of the major reasons why it endured so well.
Okay. Karen?
I think anytime you have a well-constructed show with amazing writing, excellent cast, and reasonable graphics for the time, you're going to get some quality stuff that's going to hold up for a while. I mean, it was a really good recipe for success and longevity. I think the characters are very clear, and when they do have dramatic moments, they are truly moments that showcase those complex emotions that they're trying to get across. And that's one of the things I tend to respond to. I respond to story and narrative, but I also really respond to strong characterization, and that's always been kind of the thing for me. I can see the moments in my head, I can see them play out, I can hear the characters speaking, and that really gives me that staying power as far as the show goes.
Okay. John?
Well, part of it is the fact that it was obviously one of the first. I mean, not the first, but it was one of the first syndicated shows to actually do serious serialization. Everything else always hit the reset button at the end of every week. But the other thing also is Joe was like one of the first show creators to really interact with the fans. Either on Genie or Raspy 5. Later moderated. There was no Twitter back then. There was barely an internet. I mean, Babylon 5 practically predates the World Wide Web. But he was out there on CompuServe and Genie and Raspy 5, or just Usenet before they had a dedicated news group, talking about the show, talking about the fans, trying to engage with them, finding out what do you want to see in the show, what do you not want to see in the show. It's like I remember, one of the original pitch lines, when he was talking about it before premiere was no cute kids, no cute robots ever, and people were like, well, okay, prove it, Yes, I know it's correct.
Sherman.
Oh yeah.
Sherman is correct. You were correct. Sherman said you can preach the audience all you want, but the writing has to be up to snuff, and that's what we were saying. Is that it's kind of a combination of what you said, John, that he was interacting with the people, but also he was interacting over a quality product and not a piece of crap. Because
before we didn't know that it was going to be a quality product. I mean, we hoped that it would be, but it was kind of like all right, talkie boy, prove it, show put your money where your mouth is.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, he was, I don't know how well this will show up here, but he was really open with the fans and getting people out. This is like this is like a week before the show went into production. This is I can't show up at all, but he invited us out to the sets, just to have like somebody, from the news groups or Genie be able to tell people, look at what they're doing. He's actually letting us see it up close, and that was blown out. But that was me and Joe on the main corridor set.
All right, Van, do you have anything else that you think?
Sherman looked like he wanted to say something.
Oh, sorry.
I have a question. Is it true? Maybe somewhat apocryphal, but was the show actually filmed in a series of warehouses outside of Los Angeles?
Well, not really outside of Los Angeles. It was in Toluca Lake, and it was a converted hot tub plant. They used to make hot tubs in there. And it was in an industrial park. It was not in like the Warner Brothers studios or anything like that. Now that was when they filmed the series. The pilot, I think, was shot at I want to say Sunset Studios, but like 30 years. I don't remember quite specifically, but no. But the show was shot in an old warehouse, manufacturing facility on Tamarack Avenue, in LA. It was. I remember. The day we went to it, we had to meet Joe at the Television Academy, and he and his wife drove us out to the facility. And we're following in our car, and we're getting into a sketchy area of town, and we're like, this is the real guy, right? He's taking, we're going somewhere cool, right? We don't need to cut and run, and that really is Straczynski, right? We're not going to get killed. But it was not an area of town that you would expect production to be shot in. There's, and you wouldn't know it just looking at the place because it just looked like your typical industrial park. The only giveaway for it was there was this great big Cynthia crossing sign on the gate that had like outlines of a Minbari, a Vorlon, and a Centauri.
Oh yeah, Van's shirt is amazing.
I've got the other one. I've got the Severed Dreams one too. I just grabbed one out of the closet in a hurry.
Yeah, I'm into.
Well, that's the better uniform anyway.
Yeah, I've actually got one of those uniforms an actual uniform of that downstairs. I didn't.
Me too, but it's way too much trouble to put on.
Yeah. Well, my problem with it is it's like the sleeves were either they shrunk, and I can't get my hand through the elastic on the around the band.
Karen knows that I had to go a couple of years ago and get a little extra material added to mine, but I got it back in like 98 from the people in Los Angeles that were working on the original costumes and uses the original material. But I kind of got I'm not the original size anymore that I was in 1998. So I had a
feeling that
few of us are.
At the beginning is an extra large, and it's like unfortunately I wear a 2X these days. So I can't really don't wear it that much anymore.
I didn't know my statement was controversial, but if you prefer the Earth Force uniform to the awesome Minbari made uniforms that they got later that are in black, which is the best color, then I don't know what to say.
And that vest, I just love the leather vest. I just always thought that Sheridan and Ivano looked so cool, that vest. Look almost like religious figures as much as military figures with the vest on.
But yeah, so Van, we were talking about why the show endures and why we're still talking about it. So do you have anything, any thoughts on that?
No. Yeah, probably. I guess I would say that there were things that made it endure, made it popular at the beginning, and there's things that make it popular now, and some of them are the same, like the writing, the acting to a certain degree, and all that. But I think that there were things back then that were appealing that are different now. Like, for example, back then, I remember what was appealing was there was mystery. You didn't know what was going to happen from episode to episode, and it continued, People used to say it's a soap opera. I'm like, no, it's not a soap opera, because soap operas never have a resolution. They just kind of go on forever and make new mysteries. I said, this is like if you took Roots or Winds of War and spread it over 5 years. You know what I'm saying? It's a big mini series, not a soap opera. But that was part of what made it popular back then. The CGI was new and there wasn't as much to compare it to kind of go, as there is maybe now. And, it just had that sense of things changing constantly and all that. That was very appealing back then. But I think today what makes it appealing is that it's a set done. It's almost like the Lord of the Rings movies. It's a big set thing that is done, that if you ask most people, they will say, oh, yes, it's very good. And it's quality from start to finish. So, today it's like you just go get the whole thing off the shelf and you have this product that you can just go through. So it's a different experience today than it was back then, but the same things that made it great back then, I think, make it great now.
Well, the other thing you also like, you tied him in Lord of the Rings, is that I mean, there were little episodes here and there, but it is primarily the voice of one author. Like Lord of the Rings. I mean, it's like, people talk about fan fiction, and I don't want to see fan fiction for Babylon 5 because I'm only interested in Joe's story. I don't want to hear anybody else's Babylon 5 because Babylon 5 is his story. And the series is that. I mean, it is, and you don't get that in television. You very rarely have writers control a story from start to finish that much. I mean, you may have a showrunner who was on the show, but he's still farming out episodes. And I don't think to this day there's been anybody that's broken his record of that many episodes in a row by one author.
2 whole seasons that he wrote all of, and 1 season where he wrote all but one of. So that's 3 seasons basically that he wrote the entire thing. And yeah, I mean, you can tell when you watch the episodes. It's like when it's a Joe episode, you can tell because that's when the stuff matters in the first 2 seasons. Like sometimes
there were other episodes that dropped things in. I mean, some of that may have been Joe dropping him into the show, but
Larry DiTilio, it was kind of like a second tier. And then there were all the other writers, and theirs were like a third tier.
Larry put some stuff in there that he shouldn't have put in there, and he got in trouble for it. No, but
Sunspot anybody?
No, but
if they mention a Jovian Sunspot, I'm like, oh, it's Larry DiTilio. There you go. Hey, oh.
But I mean, he used all the other writers, as they were building things up. But once he got into the meat of the story, I mean, that's when he had to sort of take it over. I mean, he knew where it was going, and he was the best person to tell that story. It's his.
Yeah. So, to answer this question myself, it's one of those things that I think about from time to time. And Van actually brought up a good point that I hadn't considered about how it's different now, because for someone who's never seen the show, like Metricula, who was just on, like now you can binge watch it, and it must be a very different experience for you first time to watch it and be able to get all the answers snap. But
and Nathan, and not have to get them by recording it at 3:00 in the morning on local Atlanta television. I used to set the VCR.
It was the same in Columbia. It was on at 3 in the morning, and I either had
Tuesdays or something.
In Nashville, we spoiled everybody. In Nashville, it was on at 9:00 on Sunday nights, right after the X-Files.
I either had to stay up really, really late on a Saturday night or set my VCR. And I did both.
I set my VCR, and I would get the tape out. When I was teaching a 7:00 in the morning through like 2:00 in the afternoon classes in Atlanta. I would get my tape out on like Wednesday morning or whatever, go in there, teach the first few classes. They go to a lunch break, and I would bring in the TV VCR cart and watch it. And my students would come in. Yes, the big cart with the big TV. And my students would always come in with about 5 minutes left in the episode. And they're like, oh, he's watching that thing again. I'm like, shut up or get out. Because that was happening at the end of season 3, beginning of season 4. And I'm just like, we will not be talking for the next 5 minutes. Everybody shut up.
Now, I want to point out, Gary's talking about how the season 3 cliffhanger about killed his watch group. Unfortunately, because of the weirdness of P10 back then, you didn't have to wait a whole summer. For whatever reason, P10 had this insane idea that they would always hold the last episode of a season to start off the run of the next. So when the season 3 cliffhanger didn't air at the end of season 3, it aired like right as they started season 4, and they rolled right into it. It was, what the hell? Mm-hmm. I remember, at the end of season 2, I mean, we actually got, they held 4 episodes, and they actually aired in England before they aired here, and we actually got tapes sent to us and had a huge watch party, months before they aired on U.S. television. But it was, P10 was just, they had some really weird.
Every time the comment comes up,
Oh, okay. P10 was just weird. I mean, we have to thank them because otherwise, the show would never have been made. Somebody brought up, the fact that the CGI wasn't the greatest, but at the time it was state of the art. But it was also one of the only reasons the show got made, because they could never have made Babylon 5 using traditional models on a budget that because Babylon 5 was made for about $800,000 an episode, whereas Trek at the time was spending about 1.7 to 1.9.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, every dollar.
Well, they were smart about everything, like even how they did sets and could dress them up multiple ways so that they didn't have to do, a bunch of different sets. They could do, they could streamline things and do that. So, but when you watch it, you don't notice that detail unless you're looking for it.
Knew where they were going. I mean, had the season mapped out, they could also plan ahead. I know that we could, Next Gen always threw in a bottle episode because they ran out of money. Joe in this case could plot in a couple of episodes where they didn't have a lot of stuff because he knows, 8 episodes from now, we're going to have a massive space battle and we need Foundation to be working on it now. That was one of the reasons why the season finale of season 1, they shot 12th because he knew how much work was going to go into it. Plus, it was also one of the things also, I think if they didn't get picked up, they would already have the end of the season done. But yeah, they shot the end of season 1 in the middle of season 1. Just because of so the cast would know where things were going, and just because of the amount of post-production work it required.
Yeah, but going back to that question about why we're still talking about it, one of the things that you learn when you listen to commentaries, or I'm sure from other places too, that Joe talks about, is that America doesn't have an epic like other countries do. And one of the things that he set out to do with Babylon 5 was to create the American epic. And so you look at the things that he's playing with, you look at the sort of archetypal concepts that he's playing with, but then also sort of creating a story that sort of resonates with, culturally. The idea of breaking away from a dictatorial fascist government, for instituting, democratic ideals, for creating a melting pot, location where various cultures can come together and create something better and stronger. It's one of those things where it's like it is, trying to create sort of thing that sort of resonates as sort of like an American story that is also, a great sci-fi story, and on top of that with the adventure and all that kind of aspect in it. And I'd never seen anything, Lord of the Rings is the thing everyone brings up. And obviously, Joe had seen Lord of the Rings, and there are a few things in there. It's not as similar to Lord of the Rings as people say when they bring up Lord of the Rings, but there is certainly that element. There's certainly that he was inspired by just the epic concept of Lord of the Rings and creating that story about true evil on an epic scale, that has to be defeated by the little guys. And all of that. I think is something that's sort of timeless. It's why we're still talking about Lord of the Rings these days too, but those are concepts that I think that people like and that they talk about. And on top of all the other things we talked about, serialized storytelling and all that kind of stuff, which also I think leads to why, people are still talking about it. But
it was a fiction about, a fascist coup to take over the government from inside. Not like that could ever happen.
Never.
I was just saying to my wife a little while ago, I said, it's funny when the show aired 30 years ago, we thought, oh, isn't that funny that we're predicting that in 250 years, the government could happen to the government. How, well, maybe in 250 years, but I don't know. And I'm like 30 years later, I'm going, oh my gosh, it's even worse than we thought.
Okay. Yeah, one of the comments earlier brought up that it was that the show is still very topical, and I think Gary just posted about that. And that's, there are so many themes, that are in the show: fascism, xenophobia, racism. We still deal with it.
It's true.
And Sherman's talking about Peter Jurassic and the contempt that he adds to his voice when he talks to Morden. That was one of the fascinating parts of the show, is that Londo would work with Morden, but you could tell he never liked him.
Well, he grew to dislike him more as time went on. But I always loved Peter's story that all he had to do to get into character was, shout out, Mr. Garibaldi. Boom, Londo was there.
Yeah. So Gary's asking us to talk about Morden.
I just watched Signs and Portents this afternoon. That's his big debut, man.
Ed Wasser giving this incredibly understated performance to this guy.
Oh God, the one thing that kills me is watching it. Looking at the Babylon 5 group on Reddit, and it happens on the Facebook group too. It's like almost every other week somebody goes, "Oh my God, did you know that Mr. Morden was in the pilot?" It's like, no, it's Ed Wasser, but he's not playing Morden. It's like, we've known it forever. You're not the first person to notice this.
It's always
I've taken to posting. I've taken to posting a GIF from Battlestar Galactica of "This has all happened before and it will happen again" every time I see those posts that pop up every week, and that's one of them.
If any of you guys and all my Facebook friends, if you saw me say the other day in a big post that I'm to the point of wanting to murder myself rather than go on any Facebook groups anymore, it was the Babylon 5 group. There you go. Truth comes out.
But yeah, Morden was he always was so interesting, even though he didn't do much. You're always sort of captivated by him on the screen, even though he's not an outlandish character at all. He's very understated in everything that he does, but somehow just the things that he said, it's an economy of movement and speech. The things that he says are always so pointed and always so, interesting that you're watching him for that.
Ed had a really good understanding of smarm.
There was always a hint of a threat to whatever he said to anybody.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Which is why it was so great, when Londo, managed to, one up him, and it's like, boom, shock.
but that's another great example of how Joe would just sprinkle things in and that narratively would pay off, because we get that line from Veer to Morden about how he wants to give him that little wave after they put his head on a pike, and we actually get that scene.
Oh well, people were. I don't know if you were watching at the time, but people were begging for that. I mean, all over Raspy 5 and Genie. I mean, people begged for that for 2 years. So I mean, if Joe hadn't have done that, we would have strung him up.
Hey, just to be clear, it's not that people say things like that bothers me. I understand that people repeat, people come and they're new and they don't know that we've talked about it. Mm-hmm. It's the responses to those people that make me want to kill somebody. But it's when it's never the first person. It's always the second or third. Morden is interesting because we had been conditioned to understand that there's a pecking order of power in the galaxy with the Vorlons, the Minbari, and then kind of everybody else trickling down. And yet he's a human, clearly, and yet he's not in that hierarchy. He's like an agent representing some other entity that we don't know anything about yet. And so it's like, well, he's a human, so I should think he's like here on the totem pole, but yet clearly he's with these guys, and it throws you off a little bit. You realize there's something more going on, and so I really like that a lot.
When we saw him, we didn't know what the shadows were. I mean, there was no anything about it.
We just see him staring down Kosh, and then Kosh needs to repair his encounter suit. Later that episode, and nobody knows what happened or how it happened. We just know that this guy was able to hurt Koch somehow, and that's really interesting.
Exactly.
We see the shadow ships in that episode, but there have been no inkling that there was something like that lurking. And then, the audience is like, what?
You very briefly see part of a shadow ship when they blow up the Raiders ship, but that's after the scene with Kosh in the hallway, so you don't know exactly what Morden did, but you're like, he did something that even if they're messing with the Vorlon, then you know that something's up. But you know that you don't know anything about the shadows yet, because half the dialogue in that episode you couldn't even get away with later, because we know who the shadows are later. Mm-hmm. But they keep making references like a prophet said that he would be killed by shadows. That's so silly. Whereas if you say that a year later, you're like, oh my gosh, the shadows are going to kill him, right? So you can only say the things that are said in Signs and Portents because you haven't met the shadows yet.
Well, and that's one of those things where I think graphically, because you talked about the scene where the shadow ship destroys the Raider ship, and there's a lot of interesting things about how they depict space and the ships in Babylon 5, but just specifically about the shadow ships. When you see that thing, it is disturbing to look at. It is this weird sort of like pockmarked sort of holes in it, like sort of ship with the tentacles and everything, and it's like you don't know what you just saw, but you are frightened by it,
and you do want to set it on fire,
right?
It was like pumice and coral.
The sound design for the shadows is probably what sells more than the ships themselves.
That screech whenever the shadows are there is it's like everything about the shadows was so perfectly designed to be unsettling, both in the sound and in the visual of the creatures themselves and their ships.
They're the Nazgul of the Lord of the Rings of Babylon 5.
No.
I can see that. Yeah.
It's right down to the screen.
No. So something I'm really curious about, because this is something that
out of curiosity.
Oh yeah, the Minbari are totally elves. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to be sure.
Yeah. And the Narn are dwarves.
Yep.
There we go.
Yep. Oh yeah, I've done the Tolkien Babylon 5 mashup in my head already. But yeah, something I'm curious about, because it always creates a lot of debate, is Gary is pointing out the realistic space physics. That's another thing you didn't see anywhere. Everywhere else in science fiction, they move like jets. And any kind of like dogfight between fighters is always like a jet fight where they're always moving forward. And in Babylon 5, you can rotate while going in a completely different direction and firing in a different direction. You have to have some sort of force to keep you from keeping going forward. And that was always really cool, because visually that was the kind of thing we never saw. But the question that I wanted to ask everybody is about Lanier's fate. because that draws so much conversation around it, and I'm kind of curious how everybody on this panel feels about it. Where Lanier at the end has that moment where just for a second he thinks about letting Sheridan die. And, we know it's only for a second because he comes back to try to rescue him. But by that point, Sheridan's already been rescued. So my question is, do you think that was wrong for the character? Or do you think that was exactly that exactly made sense for everything that we had seen?
That makes sense for a lot of people. I mean, that's exactly what happened. Of course, it pissed a lot of people off, wrongly. But that's what happened with Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, which I still think is the best of the current 3 films. Fight me. But Joe told Moomy, early on that, something like that was going to happen, because Lanier or Moomy asked him if he could play, Lanier as if Lanier was in love with Delenn. And, Joe was like, yeah, you can do that. Might not work, might not turn out the way you want it to, but that's, people do stuff like that, if in love triangles or whatever, you just have a moment of stupidity and do something stupid. I mean, we've all done it. Maybe not like try to leave somebody to die, but we've all done something really stupid like that. Now, Van, I know about you last year, Dragon Con,
Can't say I have done that. No.
Right.
I'll just say I thought it was a terrible decision, not on Lanier's part, on Joe's part. I thought I could get where he was going with it. I understood that, you build up the whole idea he's in love with Delenn, but she's with Sheridan, and so Delenn's jealous. I mean, Lanier's jealous, but I know that Billy Moomy objected to having to play it, right? He didn't agree with it either. He didn't want to do it, and he kind of had to.
Right. And it's not his decision. I mean, he didn't.
Exactly. But I agree with him, though, that I don't think it fit the character. Again, I think it fit where a narrative could go in that situation, but I don't think that specific character, based on what I had observed of him for 4.5 years up to that point, I don't think that's where he would have gone. It felt very out of character to me, and I do understand that people do dumb things and all that. That just seemed a bridge too far out of beyond a dumb thing to me.
I don't know. I mean, Lanier had little bits of a dark side to him that would pop up every now and then. Like, I think there was something when, Marcus was messing with him and Lanier basically just grabbed him by the neck and lifted him. Marcus was this close to getting killed by Lanier. Lanier had that little, we didn't see it a lot, but there was a little bit of a dark side to him. So I have no problem with it.
Yeah, it was the one where Delenn was kidnapped and Lanier was still planning the ceremony. And Marcus was like, what are you doing? And Lanier is just like, it's important to her, so I'm going to do it. Karen, what do you think about how Lanier ended up?
I mean, I get why. I get the concept. And I get sometimes you also have to hobble your heroes a little bit to some extent. You can't have them be 100% pure and good and perfect and everything without really super many flaws. I get it. I don't know if I would have ever written it that way. Let's just put it that way. I like a moment flashes across his face where he briefly considers but then discards it immediately. Right. Immediately, not like we're gonna just go ahead and hope no one says anything. I don't have a major problem with it from a narrative point, but I understand why people do have a problem with it from a character standpoint.
Yeah. What about you, Sherman?
I always felt it was like a resurfacing of the old contempt that the Minbari had for humans before they learned about their connection to the humans and the Minbari souls being reborn in the human soul. So that's what I thought. That's how I interpreted it. It was that he just hadn't ever gotten over and through that, and it sort of probably one of the worst possible times.
Yeah, I actually, funny enough, I agree with John the most out of everybody, because I always thought that with the way that Minbari society is so black and white, and about how it's so, like Lanier harbored an affection, for somebody that he shouldn't have. And, there's a quote in an earlier episode where Delenn says, if you do the right thing for the wrong reason, your work is corrupt. And that's Lanier. I mean, he is doing all this for Delenn, for his love for Delenn. He's not doing it because it's the right thing to do. And because of that, all these things that he's doing is even joining the Rangers. It's doing it because it's what Delenn wants him to do. It's not coming from himself. And so because of that, and because all of those actions are part of that, there's even the scene where Delenn finds out, he goes back with her in her memories to see that she was the one that started the Earth-Minbari War. And he immediately jumps on this idea of, oh, this is why you're with Sheridan, is just to make amends. And when she says, you can't believe that, he immediately goes like, oh, no, that's just what other people are going to say. But you can tell it's what he thought until she said that. And then he's covering himself. And so all these things, I saw it coming from a mile away. I didn't know if they would ever go there, but I certainly saw it as a potential within his character. And to me, that's another one of those things that, it's not a great thing, but is it satisfying because you can see all the threads that were built up throughout the series? Yes. So, I mean, I always liked that. I always thought it was one of the best things about the show is that they allowed characters to turn bad. I mean, they didn't,
You make an interesting point there, though, that you saw it coming. And I felt like it was taking the easy way in some ways. I wish that JMS had put a little more thought into like actually complicating it rather than just saying he's been jealous. Boom, he does exactly what you think he's going to do. I just feel like he could have, like Karen said, go right up to the point and then go, wait, no, that's crazy. I can't do that. Anything more creative than just exactly what we feared he was going to do, but
that's a good point. I don't know what the rules are as far as timing because Gary isn't here. I think that we're going long, but hey, Gary's telling us to keep going, so we're gonna keep going. Seasons 4 to 5. So if you're watching the show for the first time now and weren't there at the time, you might feel like there's sort of a weird kind of shift when you get to season 5, and it seems like the series kind of grinds to almost a halt pacing wise after being really frenetic in season 4. So John, since you were working with the show at that point, do you want to talk a little bit about the what's going on behind the scenes and everything?
It's no secret. I mean, P10 was shutting down, and they thought everything had been canceled. So that's why they were planning on wrapping things up at the end of season 4. Now, I'm not exactly sure when the talk started, but because I was already in the midst of working on the new video that ended up being the Welcome to the Third Age one. And I got a phone call from Joe, not an email, saying, how close are you to being done? It's like, well, I'm getting there. And it's like, well, can you be done by Monday? Why? And it's like, well, because I have to be in Atlanta on Wednesday. I can't exactly tell you why, but I need your video. And basically, it was because he had a meeting with TNT. It was one of the first. I don't know if it was the first, but it was. I mean, he was actually going down there to pitch the show to TNT. And so basically, I put in an all weekend edit session, overnighted some tapes to him, and I was actually prepared to drive to Atlanta to meet him with another backup, and in case the tapes didn't, because we were having to FedEx stuff back then, FedEx him a VHS in case it didn't get to Burbank in time for him to catch his flight back to Atlanta. So I knew that was up that early on because I actually had to put the TNT branding on it, as a pitch to them. And I remember we actually debuted that at DragonCon that year because back then DragonCon was still being held in the summer. I think it was 4th of July weekend.
Originally, yeah, at one point at least.
Yeah, that may have been 99. I don't remember about 98, but I remember at the 98 convention, nobody knew that announcement was coming, but in between May and July, when everything got worked out, they'd already done all the photographs, and with the set, with the crew and the TNT postcards, and they already had the TV guides ready to go to distribute at that convention because that was how we made the announcement. We ran what everybody thought was going to be the new Babylon 5 music video, and it ended with the coming to TNT January 19. No, it was 97 because 98 when they premiered on TNT. And so you want to talk about a room erupting, because they had one of the massive ballrooms over in not the America's Mart. I don't remember specifically which area it was now, but I remember that year they said they made big ballrooms in the America's Mart or the Merchandise Mart or something like that, and we had all the TNT postcards and the TV guides ready to distribute at the end of that panel. But and so that's when everything happened. In that short amount of time, I think and then the cast problems with Joe, in the Blackpool convention. I wasn't involved in any of that, but there was some miscommunication where Claudia's agent was trying to angle to get her better pay or a better deal, and like I said, something went wrong there, which meant they had to drop her, and then Joe had to retool things. But the show was going to end with season 4 until TNT came through, and it wasn't, and they knew it was going to be a 1-year thing. I mean, it wasn't going to be like, let's get a season 5, season 6, let's keep this going. I mean, Joe was adamant that no, you're only going to get 1 season, some movies, and then maybe a spinoff. And TNT went into this knowing, that that any spinoff they got was going to be, a spinoff of Babylon 5 in the Babylon 5 universe. Not, as they tried to change it, as to TNA meets Baywatch in space, which is what they tried to force it to make it into. And Joe was like, not gonna happen.
Well, yeah, and that's why when you watch it, season 4 seems to be so jam-packed. As Joe he had always planned on 5 years, but he had to take, when he wasn't sure he was going to get that 5th year, he was taking elements out of season 5 and putting them into season 4 just so he could finish with.
Not as much as people think. I mean, season 4. Under his original plan, season 4 would have ended with the Sheridan being interrogated episode, Intersections of Real Time. That was going to be where they left season 4 off. So he shifted a little forward, but not as much as people think. But part of the problem was with all the rejigging and the rewrites. Because it was supposed to have been Claudia that was going to have. Ivanova that was going to have the relationship with Marcus and everything like that. And then he had to introduce a new character, then introduce a telepath, rejigger it for Patricia, and it was just threw for a loop.
The whole thing is worth it that we didn't get Ivanova with Byron.
Yeah,
who knows?
All worth it to not have. I mean, I feel bad for Lita, but we didn't get, because Ivanova and Byron, that would not for a second work.
We don't know that because who knows, because you would have had to play with Ivanova's latent telepathy.
The two actors, they just no.
Who knows?
No,
maybe they would have cast someone different for Byron if he was playing opposite Claudia.
Yeah, that would be
I don't know if that went into their decision with Byron, if it was because it was, if they put him against Patricia and maybe they had some scenes together during auditions or something. I don't know, but I'm just saying maybe that would have been different. But yeah. And so season 5 seems a little empty because of that. I mean, it does seem like there's a little bit of filler and it's a little, a slow compared to the prior seasons. I mean, certainly towards the end of the season, it picks back up again. And I feel like, the ending of Babylon 5 is still very strong. But I remember struggling a little bit watching it after I'd been primed by seasons 3 and 4 going into season 5 and feeling like this, it's not as exciting. It's not as great as it used to be until we get to those final, the back half.
Think how many of the great characters you've lost by that point, though. There's no more Shadows. There's no more Kosh. There's no more Vorlons. There's no more Mr. Morden. I mean, you've lost so much of what made the show so cool up through season 4. You're left. You don't even have Ivanova anymore. I mean, you don't have Marcus anymore. It's stripped down to just like half of the main cast and hardly anybody else. And then a lot, most of the main plot lines have been resolved, and you're just you don't want to start anything else other than stuff that has to be finished in Peter David novels later. So, you're really, I was talking about this on the group the other day and people didn't seem to understand. Again, I want to murder them all. there's a JMS quote where he talks about wham episodes, meaning episodes where big things happen that impact the overall storyline. And he says there's a few in season 1, there's more in season 2, about half in season 3, even more in season 4. And he's like, every episode of season 5 is a wham episode. And I'm like, season 5 has like 2 wham episodes, if that. So clearly it drastically changed from what it was supposed to be, right? I mean,
Yeah, the rest are just George Michael solo.
well, because the storylines were done.
Yeah, I mean the Bester and Garibaldi, you're kind of watching for that because that's still going on, and after the
talk about Bester.
Yeah,
Sure.
talk about Bester.
So evil? Yes, no, or just doing what he has to do to advocate for
any
his
good
group.
fascist cop,
Yes.
like any good, stormtrooper. Sure, I mean, just
Well, here's the thing, and here's why I don't see Bester as this is why I don't see Bester like a Magneto type, like an X-Men, where like Magneto is doing this because he wants to do what's right for his people.
That's
Bester to me is like you can see him trying to gain power for himself. This is about him ending up on top. I think he's a very selfishly motivated character. I do not believe that he is all about, freedom for telepaths. It's how do I create a new structure where I'm the ruler of everything? Telepaths are on top, but I'm on top of telepaths, and then we're just going to rule everything below us. And so, yeah, I don't.
Bester is like the Prince Humperdinck of the Babylon 5. No, seriously, I mean, because, he doesn't die. I mean, he lives. He makes it through the story. He shouldn't, and because he deserves to die, and but he makes it through because life doesn't always, you don't always get what you want. Now, granted, I love the final scene, quote unquote, between Garibaldi and Bester that doesn't happen in the show. It happens in one of the books. But because that's just one of those perfect little cappers that if they'd ever done a film, the show would have worked it in somehow.
And we would have gotten a Bester episode of Crusade in season 1, which is just soul crushing to me. We were going to see Bester again in Crusade, and we didn't get to that episode. The script exists, but
there are so many lost opportunities because Crusade didn't continue. Because Crusade could have tied up all the loose ends from Babylon 5 over the course of its 5-year series.
Yeah, because I mean, the story of Crusade was not going to be the story of the Drakh Plague. I mean, Joe was supposedly going to have that wrapped up before the middle of season 2, and they were going to be on to something else. That was my understanding.
Yes, Crusade rules and rocks.
Yes.
Here, man, look upon these works.
I've wept since 1999.
Huh?
I've wept about it since 1999.
I've still got one of the original posters that we gave out down in my office downstairs. But yeah, this is actually one of the original hats from the set. So.
Yeah, I mean, let's just take a minute to talk about Crusade and the fact that it was a completely different kind of show, but it was the same things. I mean, Babylon 5 was great because it had great casting. It had a great story basis. It had very interesting ideas going on. Crusade had all those things, great cast, interesting characters, interesting story going on, all sorts of subtext and things going on beneath the surface that would pay off later. You could tell. And we didn't
just had a network that didn't want it.
Yeah.
They had buyer's remorse. They wanted something else. They weren't going to get it, and Joe wasn't going to give them to it. He was going to give them the show that they bought, not the show that they wanted.
Crusade had 2 great characters that could have carried it on. It had a very good captain, Gary Cole, very good. I mean, not great, but very, very good. When he's got the Apocalypse box, he's borderline great, because it's erratic and you don't know what's going on. But the 2 great characters, Galen, obviously, the techno mage, he's Merlin, right? And Max Eilerson, who is so complex, so many shades of gray, could be good, could be bad. You don't know where he's going exactly, but he's kind of got a heart of gold in there somewhere. And the 2 of them, I thought, made that show. if it had leaned more on them, because they never quite figured out what to do with Dorina. They never quite figured out what to do with the Doctor. Matheson was okay, but he never really had a chance to do a whole lot, But man, I thought that Max and Galen, the two of them at their best, really carried it and could have made it into something fantastic.
Well, there were only 13 episodes. I mean, you look at Babylon 5, 13 episodes in. I mean, we didn't know a lot back then either.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I say compare the first 13 or the 13 we have of Crusade to the first 13 of Babylon 5, and Crusade holds up pretty well. I would say arguably it's better than the first 13 of Babylon 5. Obviously Babylon 5 though got to have its whole series, and so overall Babylon 5 is fantastic and is way greater than Crusade. But yeah, just comparing those first 13 of
they're
Babylon
all better
5.
than TKO.
Not my least favorite of the series, but we're not going to get into that.
The Mutai.
Yeah. So yeah, how about you, Karen? What do you think about Crusade?
I think it's a lot of lost opportunities. I would compare it almost to jump franchises just a little bit. I would almost compare it to Stargate with Universe, because it had ability to be something, but it wasn't exactly like what it was before. So it wasn't really supported in the same way, and so it pretty much died on the vine.
Yeah.
To me, that kind of feels like how it went.
That vine was cut before it ever sprouted.
Yeah. Gary's telling me we got to wrap up with final thoughts. So, Sherman, why don't you really quick say what you thought of Crusade, and then we're going to just give our final thoughts on B5.
I never really saw it. I didn't have access to cable or satellite at that time, so I never even saw it. Other than clips and a few shows here and there, like when I wouldn't be at home or something like that, that would be about the only time I'd ever see it.
Sherman, you may have to be given.
So I wasn't able to really get into it.
You may.
I recommend giving it a try if you ever get
into it. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah. So final thoughts on Babylon 5. Sherman, since you were already talking, why don't you go?
I think it holds up. I think it laid groundwork for a lot of more serialized TV that we have now. And for the time, I really enjoyed the CGI effects on it. That was the thing that really held my attention more than a lot of the other stuff. But the writing and the acting helped too.
All right. And Van, final thoughts on Babylon 5.
It's the greatest thing ever.
Okay. Karen?
How can I go after that? I would say that if I could see it now, if I could see it now as people approach it now who haven't been able to see it before, I almost probably would have appreciated it a little bit more. But there was something in it in the way that we got to experience it, which is you had to find it. You had to snatch it. You had to be looking for it at 3 a.m. You had to be willing to put in the effort. And that investment did pay off in something really great. And so it's hard to reject even the memory of those investments. And maybe that even influences our impression of it even more. Like we think of it even more than it is, but objectively great, even from people who are just now experiencing it. I'm really excited people still are.
All right. And John?
Well, I obviously, I owe my career to Babylon 5. I was already working in local television at the time, but, I think I can trace everything that's happened since to that. That Joe actually, for whatever reason, decided to, throw some stuff my way. Because I'll tell you this real quick. I actually didn't go to work for Babylon 5. When in '94 there was some stuff at the station, and I ended up losing the job because I went through some changes. And I actually talked to Joe and John Copeland about, can I come out there and work for you? This is before the videos. And John Copeland called me up here at home, and we had a long talk, and he convinced me to stay and not come to LA because I was like a semester away from getting my degree. And he was like, it will do you more good to finish, your college career and finish your degree. Because here in Knoxville, I was a bigger fish in a smaller pond. Out there, I would have been one among millions. And, if I had gone to LA, the videos may never have happened. So, me staying here and not going to LA and not going to work on Babylon 5 ended up making me working on Babylon 5. But, So I owe a lot to that show. I mean, my car license plate to this day still reads Babylon 5, and people will see it now. They'll start honking at me. I'm trying to figure out what did I do wrong, and then they pull up to me and they're like, Babylon 5. Watching the show now is a little rough. Not that the show's rough, but because we've lost so many people. So many of them were my friends.
Crazy.
It's tough to watch sometimes, and but we'll see what happens. Hopefully there'll be some kind of big reunion show here, and not TV show, but like a convention like we did in Phoenix 8 years ago, because we got the 30th anniversary coming up in 2 years. Mm-hmm. Who knows? But like I said, I wouldn't have a career without Babylon 5. So for me, I gotta love it.
Yeah, I'm going to echo all the sentiments about, how I feel like the show. Yeah, you're saying Faith manages, but I'll echo the sentiments about that Babylon 5 still holds up. I mean, I watch it now. It's as good as anything on TV. It's better than anything on TV. Because even though now serialized storytelling is becoming more popular, it's still very small. They'll have arcs that go between, within a season or maybe even a whole season, but you never see any show plan out multiple seasons and try to carry a particular story throughout multiple seasons. The ambition of Babylon 5, I don't think, has been matched by anything else. And that allows for a greater story than I think that anything else has done just because of that. So,
yeah, because that's where you run into things like, Game of Thrones, which, had a great, where they followed what George had written, they were fantastic. That's with them. It's what's interesting though is Babylon 5 was one of the last big shows that came from the era where you had to have 20 something episodes a season. Right. They did 22 back when Next Gen was doing like 26. But granted, I don't ever want to see a reboot. But if something were like that were ever to happen, imagine a future Babylon 5 version of the story would be very condensed. Mm-hmm. You only have like 10 episodes a season, so the filler goes out the window. So it'll all be wham, maybe.
No TKO? No TKO?
Yeah, no TKO.
We won't get the multi.
but all right, but it was of a time where you had to have that many episodes a season, especially when you're in syndication, because you had to fill up every week of the year. You didn't have condensed storylines. I mean, because I remember at the time there was a thread on Genie at one point where Joe was talking about, he talked about what you have nowadays with things like, what you're doing with Kickstarter and Mr. Science Theater 3000, where the fans pony up the money to finance a new season independent of a studio. Because that was even being discussed back in the mid 90s, when as the future of distribution, because, outside of syndication, it didn't seem possible back then. And, what Joel Hodgson's done these days is wonderful, I think. I'm the backers of it.
Well, unfortunately, I think we could continue talking about Babylon 5 for hours and hours, but I am being told that it is time to end. It is time to end the panel. So everybody say where people can find you, plug your stuff. So let's start with you, Karen.
Well, you can find me at various locations in Georgia, but also on the web mostly in Facebook. We do have an MSFM track Twitter handle, so there's that too. But you can find us at Military Sci-Fi Media at DragonCon, and that's one of our main places where we communicate. We have a page, and we also have a fairly active group where we post information. And it's Babylon 5, it's Stargate, it's Farscape, it's BSG, it's everything and everywhere you want to be.
1999.
All right, and Sherman, why don't you say goodbye and let people know where they can find you?
I can be found on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest. Nerdburger358 and my name Sherman Burris on Facebook. I'm in a number of different groups all over Facebook, so just look for me there.
All right, and John?
I'm on Twitter at John Hudgens. I don't use it that often. My films, American Scary and Backyard Blockbusters, are available on Amazon. They're not on Prime anymore. They're you have to rent or purchase them, but And unfortunately, the DVD versions are going out of print next month. I hate to say it, but if you want to buy the DVD of them, you need to do it before June 4th. But yeah, I've got 2 feature films: American Scary, Backyard Blockbusters. I do documentaries these days. But like I said, they're available on DVD for another week or 2, or you can stream them on Amazon Prime. Pay to stream them on there. And theoretically, depending on how COVID wraps up, and I can start doing stuff soon, I'm in the process of working on a new documentary called Chair, which is all about improv and improv comedy. So hopefully in the next year or so, I'll have something close to being done with that. Although there is a trailer for that if you look for Z Team Productions on YouTube.
All right, and Van.
I am at Van Allen Plexico on Twitter and www.plexico.net. And for the Babylon 5 fans out there, there is the White Rocket Babylon 5 review podcast, which is on all the podcast apps and also at www.b5review.com.
All right, and I am Nathan Laws. As I said before, my podcast is the 42 Cast. It's actually your ultimate answer to fandom geekiness and everything. It is a show where it's all my friends. We sort of rotate in and out. We talk about any topic in genre fiction, and I'm also on Time Streams, which is a podcast where my friend Juliet and I talk about Doctor Who from the very beginning to now. And we're at the end of season 1 right now, so we're just starting out that journey. But everyone, thank you for being on the Babylon 5 podcast. Next week is going to be the movies that traumatized us. So thank you for joining us.
Late delivery from Boston.
The movie that traumatized us is going to be the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, right? For everybody,
Bye.